Winston Churchill, renowned for resilience, leadership, and an indomitable spirit. But beyond the battlefield and political stage, Churchill was a man of remarkable personal style. His tastes, as carefully curated as his speeches, helped craft his powerful persona and left an indelible mark on British culture. Hi, I'm Kirby Allison, and in this new series, we're going to take a closer look at one of history's most compelling and stylish figures, Winston Churchill. Churchill once quipped, "My tastes are simple. I'm easily satisfied with the best." On what is the 150th anniversary of his birth, we embark on a journey to explore what these tastes reveal about the man behind the legend and how they helped shape the British icon we remember today. From his cherished cigars, favorite champagne, and signature fragrance, to his bespoke wardrobe, our journey starts at his birthplace, Blenheim Palace, travels through the prestigious boutiques and tailors of London's Mayfair, and concludes at Chartwell House, where he spent his final years. So join me as we explore the world of quality, craftsmanship, and tradition, unstitching the finest of British heritage and gaining fresh insights into the man who set the standard for what it meant to be a true English gentleman. Blenheim Palace, a monumental blend of Baroque architecture, grand gardens, and opulent interiors. This isn't just a palace, it's a symbol of British heritage and the ancestral home of the Dukes of Marlborough. Built to celebrate victory in the Battle of Blenheim, this estate has been steeped in the history and tradition of one of Britain's most distinguished families. And it was here, on November 30th, 1874, some 150 years ago, that one of Britain's most iconic leaders was born. His connection to Blenheim Palace goes beyond mere family ties. It shaped the man who would come to define Britain's spirit in the 20th century. Today, I'm joined by my dear friend Simon Cundy of Henry Poole as we meet George Spencer Churchill, the Marquis of Blandford, and a relative of Winston Churchill, to discuss the impact that Blenheim Palace had on Churchill's early tastes and his lifelong affinity for quality, craftsmanship, and tradition. George, thank you so much for having us.
No worries.
How are you? Always.
Good to see you.
Yeah, lovely to be here.
Lovely journey down? Or?
Yeah, well, I mean, pulling in, there's probably no more impressive view in all of Europe, with no exaggeration.
Yes.
And here in fall, I mean, to see the leaves turning colors.
Oh yeah, it's a beautiful time of year.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting us
No, it's an
to the
absolute
gates.
pleasure to have you guys here. And yeah, there's a lot to see. There's a lot to capture your mind here, and it's an experience I want everyone to see.
Yeah, well, it's an incredible property, and we think of Chartwell, which we'll have the opportunity to visit later on this week, and the role of the National Trust in preserving that property. But then you think of estates like this one that's been in your family now for over 7 generations, and the role of your family in preserving this, for future generations to enjoy. And as we saw on our drive up, I mean, it really is something that is enjoyed by the entire community.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I do a good job, the estate will be further preserved for future generations, and hopefully will be in sort of a further 7 generations' times. People will be doing the same thing, talking about how the estate can progress from that era.
For me to come over the bridge is always spectacular. I think you have the landscape by Capability Brown, which is synonymous in the British sort of heritage of the greatest gardens.
Well, originally it was a stream coming through, and then Capability Brown got his hands on it and essentially flooded the stream to create this lake. And there were once numerous rooms which are still there today, but they're severely underwater because of what Capability Brown did.
Well, I mean, Simon and I are at the beginning of a very exciting journey, looking at the fabric of one of Britain's great icons, of course, Winston Churchill.
Yes.
One of the most important men of the 20th century that we know so much about, but he was unapologetic about his indulgences and his pursuit for quality. This was a man that understood what quality was, and of course he was born here at Blenheim Palace.
Yeah, so Winston is a big part of Blenheim's history and one of the main draws of visitors here today. People, whoever they are, wherever they're from, have a real some sort of love for Winston. And as a lot of people know, he was born in one of the rooms here at Blenheim. Undeliberately, he was visiting here with his mother when she went into labour very early, I think. And they raced to the house and found the nearest available room. He was born there and then, and today his bed still lies there. Various artifacts of his are still in the room, and it's lovely putting the pieces of history together for Winston.
Yeah, you know, George is someone that's grown up here as well. How do you suspect that Blenheim Palace might have influenced Sir Winston's hand for quality?
Yeah, I guess when you look at the grandeur of the Blenheim itself, it's a work of art, really, in terms of craftsmanship, the history of it, and I guess being associated and around that kind of setting, you sort of gain the responsibilities and the you have the eye for detail, and hopefully, well, perhaps that was where Winston gained some of that from. I think it was always had a special place in his heart, Blenheim.
And in the late 19th century and then early 20th century, you know, especially, you know, at this level of kind of the social strata, I mean, there still was very much a very strong tradition of decorum and how one would dress, right? So dressing in white tie and black tie and various uniforms would have been a part of, again, that fabric in which he was born into and raised.
Yes, I think Winston's dress style was iconic, as you know, Simon. I've seen many of your archives, and we can go through his listings of what he bought, I think even down to the sizes he bought.
So Winston's very special for us, and you know, he was very much in our books, and every type of sort of civil clothes and evening clothes and ceremonial clothes, we've been dressing him. So it's very much the fact of going to here to see the place of his birth is very special. And I know we've worked on a number of the clothes which reside here, and including, I think, the museum you have here, where it features his room with his special room to the actual house.
Yeah, I think there will always be an iconic Winston Churchill look, which will probably go on in many generations to come, to look at how a gentleman like that dressed. And you know, if you think of Winston Churchill now, you sort of imagine a person immaculately dressed with a cigar in hand, probably having a whiskey, sat on a chair and looking very comfortable. I think that will long live, certainly our generation.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible that Winston Churchill, probably one of the most written about men in the 20th century, that there somehow remains facets of his persona and life that still bear exploration, you know, as we are seeking to do in this particular series. And I think in some ways it speaks to just how multidimensional and how really a larger than life Winston Churchill, you know, was, that some 150 years after his birth, you know, we're still, you know, kind of exploring, you know, what it was that made him, you know, the man we know him today as.
I think for me, the next part is going to be looking at some of the clothes that he came up with and what he had to get involved with, his many aspects of ceremonial dress, his many aspects of establishments in his military roles, his civil roles, and also the clothes that came with it. So some of these clothes have been locked up for years, that we're going to hopefully have a chance to see them, explore them, and see the photograph that was taken with his garments. And that's the journey that we're going to be exciting about, that we'll be part of.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. There's plenty to explore, and I'm sure you'll feast your eyes.
Thanks.
From my conversations here today, it's clear that the sheer grandeur of Blenheim Palace left an indelible mark on Churchill. This was not only his birthplace, but a foundation, a place that profoundly shaped his worldview, his tastes, and his sense of identity. Though Churchill spent much of his life amidst the cultural vibrancy of London and on foreign soils, Blenheim remained a cornerstone, an important piece of his identity. It grounded him, provided continuity, and served as a reminder of the great legacy he carried. Here, surrounded by the craftsmanship found in the beautiful interiors, history of the family estate, and splendor of the palace itself, Blenheim epitomizes the best of British heritage, and it is here where Churchill's appreciation for quality, craftsmanship, and tradition took root. As we move forward, we next explore how his connection to these values deepened after he left Blenheim's halls, following him into his adult life and influencing the way he presented himself to the world. We'll see how his style, a seamless blend of tradition and individuality, mirrored the complex character that would come to symbolize Britain itself. London, a city of sophistication, resilience, and timeless charm. After leaving Blenheim Palace, this dynamic metropolis became Winston Churchill's home. But it was more than just a backdrop to his political career. London shaped his tastes, his lifestyle, and ultimately his enduring identity. Amidst the city's iconic British heritage firms, establishments that long epitomized quality, craftsmanship, and tradition, Churchill carefully curated his sartorial identity, selecting the fine suits, accessories, and signature details that defined his distinctive persona in celebrated style. Churchill was a man of great taste, and his fragrance choices were no exception. Established in 1730, Floris is one of London's oldest and most distinguished perfumeries. Known for crafting luxurious scents, Floris has long attracted royalty, celebrities, and statesmen alike, including one of Britain's most celebrated figures, Winston Churchill. Churchill's relationship with Floris was a testament to his understanding of the power of fragrance. Today we'll take a closer look at the iconic Special No. 127, which accompanied him throughout his remarkable life. Edward.
Kirby,
Yeah.
welcome.
Well, it's so nice to be back in London, and I have to say, a very exciting day. We were at Blenheim Palace, of course, beginning to really explore the fabric of one of Britain's most iconic figures, Winston Churchill. And so we're here really looking into these British heritage firms that he frequented and that helped him construct this persona. And I understand that he has a very strong connection to Floris.
That's right, yeah. He spent a lot of his time in this area, in St. James's, and he was a regular customer of ours. Himself and his wife, they used to shop with us quite regularly.
What was his fragrance from Floris?
He wore a fragrance called Special No. 127,
Okay.
which is a fragrance that is one of our classic fragrances, actually created in 1890.
Really? Okay, so predating Winston Churchill.
Yeah, predating Winston Churchill, that's right. And it was actually made as a bespoke customer for a duke who was exiled in Paris.
Okay.
And it was his bespoke fragrance. And when he passed away, he didn't have any family members who were able to sort of carry the fragrance on. So it was decided by my family at the time to launch the fragrance into the range. And because his formula was on page 127 of the specials book,
Okay.
it was decided to call the fragrance Special No. 127.
Yeah. Well, let's go back a little bit to the social context of that era. I mean, this is, the late 19th century, turn of the 20th century in London, which was in some ways the capital of the civilized world at that time. How important was fragrance? And was it something that everyone had? I mean, help me understand that social context.
Fragrance was, I suppose, a sort of an extension of your personality and your character, and people that could afford to wear a fragrance. It was something that was a luxury to be able to wear a fragrance, and for it to be sort of an extra dimension of your character, if you like. So we all sort of know the feeling that you sort of enter a room, and if for someone that always wears the same fragrance, you think, oh, so and so has been here, because you're aware of that, the aura of them, as well as the scent that they carry with them.
What's interesting with the fragrance, its ability not only to develop familiarity with those that are around you, almost as a subtle calling card, but also, I mean, for myself, I find that wearing my fragrance, in some ways, whenever I spray it in the morning, is preparing me for the day.
A lot of customers say to me, as I feel myself, that I'm not really properly dressed unless I put my fragrance on in the morning. It's very much part of the ritual of getting ready. And I mean, there is a certain comfort, I think, in wearing a fragrance wherever you are in the world or whatever's going on, to put your fragrance on it. And there's that sort of comfort to it and reassurance. I think that's a big part of wearing a fragrance.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has a very timeless allure. And we see that today. I mean, you walk into Floris and, you've got a very loyal clientele that has probably at this point stretching back, generations, if not centuries in many instances.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's this sort of emotional connection that fragrance has, and I find very powerful as well as being completely invisible. Once you're wearing a fragrance, the power that a fragrance carries with it, and the impact it can have on somebody, and the memories it can bring. And just the feelings and the comfort it can bring are quite overwhelming.
Well, then, how do you think Winston Churchill would have arrived at the 127?
Well, if you'd like to come with me, I'll show you into our perfumery, and we can just have a look at some of the ingredients that go into that and the process that would have gone behind.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
Please follow me.
In every bottle crafted at Floris, there is a commitment to quality that Churchill admired. I'm now heading into Floris's Bespoke perfumery, still available to this day by appointment for those seeking to craft a distinctive, totally unique fragrance, to fully understand the allure and power of Churchill's signature scent. This is the table.
That's right, this is the table where all the magic happens.
This is where the special 127 could have been created, on this desk in this room.
Could well have been, actually, yes. This desk has been passed down through the generations, so it's had a lot of fragrance spilt on it over the years. It's got a lot of character to it.
It literally steeped in history, right?
Oh, right, yes. And this is one of our formula books here, and we actually have a special number 127 in here.
Really?
As well. And we can see the special number 127 formula actually on page 227 of this book, to keep some continuity going there.
So the specials book would have been exclusively those bespoke fragrances. So then whenever the decision was made within the family to pull special 127 out of the specials and into the actual house collection, that's when it would have been written down into this book.
Right.
Amazing. I mean, what an incredible, piece of history. I mean, I can't help but notice, the brass lock or clasp here. I mean, literally your family's most treasured kind of repository right here sitting in front of us.
That's right. It's very well loved over the years and used. This was actually the working book where all the fragrances, or from which all the fragrances were created.
Okay.
Back in the early days. Mm-hmm. So you can see how well thumbed they are, and various sort of blobs of the essences and oil over the years. And even sort of little amendments that have been made here and there where a certain ingredient perhaps wasn't available, or a family member wanted to make their own sort of twist on a fragrance just by tweaking the ingredients or the quantities slightly.
So what are the components of the special 127 and what makes it unique? I mean, kind of looking back to its creation originally and then jumping forward to perhaps, what it was that Winston Churchill found so alluring about it. What insights can we gain from this ledger?
Well, we have the breakdown of the different ingredients. I've prepared some of them here, and the way a fragrance is really composed is the top notes, which are the notes that lift off in the first few seconds or minutes. Special number 127 has a very uplifting, invigorating top note to it. I'll just show you. So bergamot is one of the sort of main top notes of the fragrance. Adds a real lift and sparkle, and adds actually a Mediterranean feel. In the world of perfumery, it's known as the most elegant of all of the citrus oils, because it has this wonderful citrus, sort of lemon, a little bit of lime, orange, but also a slightly floral note as well, sort of softer floral note, and almost a sort of woody facet to it as well. Petitgrain is really one of the distinguishing ingredients within 127, which is actually an oil which is distilled from the leaves and the twigs of the bitter orange tree.
Really?
And adds a spiciness and a green facet to the fragrance,
Absolutely.
which is quite a prominent part of Special Number 127. But in its style, 127 is very much an eau de cologne type of style, but with a very English interpretation of an eau de cologne.
This is really beginning to kind of layer in some subtle elegance.
Definitely, and I think Churchill being, he loved the outdoors and loved his garden, and I think obviously there are some quite prominent floral notes within Special 127. Lavender as well, which is another important element of the fragrance. To give the longevity, there are some really lovely woody notes. One of which is patchouli, which we have here. Patchouli here is it's actually from a shrub, but it's classed as a part of the woody family. And it's often referred to as the strongest natural ingredient available in perfumery. And it has this really sort of, this real warmth thing, a sort of darkness to it, which adds to the longevity of a fragrance. And this is an important factor to let 127 last with you all day, really. It sort of carries it through, along with the addition of cedarwood, which I also have here.
So how many total ingredients of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
These are just
6?
some of them, actually. These are just some of the most prominent ones, but within the fragrance itself, about 25, 30 ingredients.
Is this really? I mean, which is quite a lot. I mean, that's a relatively sophisticated fragrance.
Yeah,
Correct.
it is really for that time, definitely. Because, I mean, these days there are a lot more ingredients available to a perfumer. So sometimes, it doesn't necessarily mean that fragrances do have more ingredients, but certainly at that time there were less of a palette that was available to a perfumer. So it does use, a good variety of raw materials within the fragrance.
And, there's no question that, Churchill, as a prolific cigar smoker, would have carried an aroma of tobacco with him. Is there anything about, how you think the Special 127 might lend itself to marrying well with that Churchill would have liked?
Oh, definitely. I think the patchouli has a sort of slightly smoky element to it, and I think that the citrus will just take off a little bit of the edge of cigar smoke.
Okay.
But I think the patchouli and the cedarwood are very, very sort of entwined with the sort of the fragrant experience of a cigar, and obviously lots of cigars are wrapped in cedarwood themselves, so that is sort of part of the I think enjoyment of a cigar. So it's quite interesting that some of those ingredients relate to the fragrance that he used to wear as well.
Yeah, because you often speak about, that all fragrances interact with everyone's personal kind of biological chemistry.
Definitely.
And that, only by wearing a fragrance can you really fully understand how that fragrance manifests for someone specifically. But in Winston Churchill's case, someone that was smoking cigars, literally all day long, I mean, he's a man of my heart. The tobacco would have been a part of that kind of personal biological chemistry that would have been interacting with this fragrance.
Definitely, yeah, it certainly would, and yeah, it's nice that it would have
Complemented
it very well, actually, yeah.
Absolutely.
So here I have the Special Number 127 as well. So we've smelt some of the different raw materials or ingredients within it. This is the final fragrance.
It's amazing.
And still very popular today, and just sort of shows the sort of timeless quality, I suppose, of fragrance. The fact that it was something that was obviously struck a chord.
Yeah.
Back in those days, well, since 1890, really.
I mean, you can definitely see what would have captivated Churchill about this fragrance, because it does have that initial nose, that we're getting from the bergamot, right? That kind of citrusy, but then you go through, the heart notes and the base notes, and you have a body and complexity that, really captivates.
Definitely. Over time, it goes on a bit of a journey. So you have the sort of and it's a nice one to, certainly if you have been smoking a cigar, there is this lovely sort of burst of freshness that you get from special number 127. It's quite exhilarating, and then it sort of mellows, and you have all these woody tones that come through as the day goes on.
Amazing.
And then the real character of the fragrance comes through, and it remains today the same as it always has done, which is reassuring.
Unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, what's incredible to me, you know, is that at a firm like Floris that has, you know, 300 plus years of history, you know, just the secrets that are to be discovered. I mean, here you have, you know, this book of formulations, you know, dating back to, you know, literally the turn of the 20th century. Right here we see the fragrance that, you know, accompanied Winston Churchill, you know, throughout his entire life, you know, through, you know, his youth, onto, you know, all the way his time as Prime Minister during World War II, and then following him afterwards, is really an incredible testament to just, you know, the thread of history that Floris, you know, really represents. And what a privilege to be here, what a privilege to, you know, gain insight into what is without question a signature of one of the 20th century's greatest men.
Oh, thank you so much for saying so. It's a privilege to have you here and to be able to show you the fragrance. And I feel myself and my family, we're custodians really of generations of my family who have created this collection over the years. And it's an honor for us to be able to add fragrances into the collection to sit alongside my ancestors' creations over the years.
Yeah. Edward, thank you so much. Everything your family does for quality craftsmanship and tradition, and opening up the pages of your firm's incredible history to allow us to gain insight into Winston Churchill.
Oh, it's such a pleasure.
Yeah.
An honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Spending the day here at Floris, I've come to recognize that within every bottle lies a thread of history woven through the fabric of Britain's social traditions, binding all who wear their fragrances to a legacy of elegance and sophistication. Churchill understood the subtle power of a fragrance as an essential element of one's identity, a quiet yet profound detail that accompanied him through the pivotal moments of his life and career. His influence endures as the scents he favored remain available to discerning men and women today. Special number 127 stands as a testament to Winston Churchill's legacy and to the timeless allure of a scent that, like its most famous patron, is both classic and unforgettable. One of Winston Churchill's most famous quotes is, "Remember, gentlemen, it's not just France we are fighting for, it's champagne." And not just any champagne would do, it had to be Pol Roger. This storied French champagne house became Churchill's favorite, his go-to for toasting victories, savoring quiet moments, and everything in between. In his words, in victory, deserve it, in defeat, need it. So join me as I uncork the story of Churchill and Pol Roger, a relationship that defined a man and a champagne. James, thank you so much for sitting down with us. And, you know, Winston Churchill, a legendary figure, larger-than-life character, and a man who was unapologetic in his indulgences. And the only indulgence that I think could rival his indulgence in cigars was his indulgence in champagne.
We've been having fun this year because it's our 175th, Churchill's 150th. So we've done a lot of research about Churchill's consumption of Pol Roger over however many years.
So bottomless.
It's not quite bottomless. The first trap we can find is 1908.
Okay.
The first invoice, the year he got engaged, he got married Clementine.
Amazing.
And that was the start. And subsequently discovered a lot of invoices to Churchill from endless wine merchants, largely within about 100, 250 yards of where we are here.
Yeah.
For a lot of Pol Roger over the years.
Well, he was a prolific consumer of Pol Roger, yeah. But many of his most famous quotes had to do with champagne.
Yes, I think some are apocryphal, some are absolutely true, some we've improved over the years.
Yeah.
And even Churchill improved half of them. I think he stole one or two of his quotes from Napoleon in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go back, you can work out Churchill's routine
Yeah.
It was whiskey and soda in the morning, champagne with lunch, working all afternoon, champagne with dinner, and then in cognac into the evening as he dictated to various sectors.
Yes. With the cigar in his hand.
We worked it out once. I think they worked out he smoked about 250,000 cigars in his lifetime.
Really?
So the alleged 40,000 bottles of Pol Roger in his lifetime was nothing by comparison with cigars.
Well, we did see a ledger, an inventory of birthday presents given to him on the occasion of his 80th birthday. And I think it was, 1 Jeroboam, 104 magnums, and 114 bottles of champagne. I mean, his friends clearly knew that he loved champagne, and not just any champagne, Pol Roger champagne, because the vast majority of that champagne was Pol Roger.
Yes, we certainly know he bought a lot of Pol Roger between 1908 and the end of the Second World War. But the real family connection came when he met Odette Pol Roger, November 44, at the British Embassy in Paris.
Okay.
He'd been out the year before after the liberation of Paris, met de Gaulle, drank Pol Roger 28 at that luncheon. And then a year later, after he was voted out of office, he went over with Mary Churchill. They drank Pol 28 again. But the Duff Coopers, who were the ambassador, they were friends of Odette Pol Roger, so she was invited up for lunch that day.
Yeah.
And she became a great mate of Churchill's.
Yeah.
And after that, he only ever drank Pol Roger.
Well, this was a man who, really had a high standard and demanded the best. I mean, one of his most famous quotes is that I'm simple to please. I'm happy with the best.
Yes. However, or I'm easily satisfied with it. Yeah, exactly.
What is it that you think that would have had him gravitate towards this firm versus other? Because there were many champagne producers at that time.
Churchill was the last of the great Victorians. Pol Roger was relatively late to the game. A lot of champagne houses were late 1700s, early 1800s. Pol Roger was only founded in 1849. But it was sold in London before it was sold in Paris.
Okay.
And so Pol was one of the great brands of the great champagne brands in London in the 1860s, 1870s. And champagne was the thing. And Pol Roger took over the British market. The three big brands in London in the 1860s, 1870s were Pol Roger, Perrier-Jouët, and Pommery, the three Ps. And we got lucky that Churchill discovered us. But interesting where we are here, we're at Giusterini's shop here. And Giusterini's were one of the big proponents of Pol Roger. They bought a whole stack of 1874. And that was then followed by a first royal warrant in 1877. Yeah. So Pol was all the rage in London in that era.
And this was an era that had a certain dominance of a social class, right? Yeah. Of which Winston Churchill was very much a part of. And born in Blenheim Palace, he was part of the aristocracy and the establishment. And Pol Roger did have many royal warrants. It was part of that environment.
Yeah, and London was sort of capital of the world in those days. It was the end of the empire. There was lots of money. The rich were very rich. Yeah. And the rich drank. Yeah. And when champagne was in inverted commas, invented in the UK, gentlemen used to drink whiskey and soda, brandy and water. Okay. But actually then champagne was where it was at. The wine merchants leapt on it, the gentlemen leapt on it, the ladies leapt on it. And you'd have gone to the Ritz or the Savoy or all those hotels and you'd drunk champagne. And Churchill was absolutely part of that generation. He had less money than most of them, but he was part of that generation. And he wanted to do as everyone else did. Okay, I think Churchill would obviously want us about this time in the afternoon to have a glass of Pol Roger.
Yes.
And so we've got a few wines to taste. My elegant colleague, there we go, thank you. Right, so we thought, till early part of this year, that Churchill never drank Pol Roger non-vintage. Because we thought he only ever drank Pol Roger vintage, which is the smarter single vintage version. But as part of our celebration this year, so that's how you open a bottle of wine. We discovered, we got a letter from the daughter of Churchill's security man. He's sort of police guard for the last 15, 20 years of his life. And she sent over a quarter bottle of Pol Roger, non-vintage, which Churchill himself had drunk a week before he died in January 1965. So we finally found the proof that Churchill had drunk non-vintage. So this is our Pol Roger non-vintage, a third of each variety.
Well, fantastic. It's champagne.
Yeah. This is Monday to Friday drinking.
Yeah. It's a great value. I mean, this is what we drink at home.
That's the right answer.
Outside of special occasions.
Yeah. Interesting. We're tasting out of wine glasses rather than champagne glasses. We like these glasses.
Yeah.
Though if you were Churchill, you'd have loved it out of a silver pint tankard.
Really?
Because part of the Churchill story, not quite the Churchill myth, is he drank a lot of his Pol Roger out of pints. Because for 100 years, between 1870 odd and 1970 odd, we shipped Pol Roger in pints, mostly for Churchill. Because he wasn't really a white wine or red wine man. He was a whiskey before, champagne with, and cognac afterwards. And so we're being a bit precious drinking out of glasses here. But I think Churchill had this reputation. I mean, he'd had this reputation all the way through. He'd been drinking, and everyone knew he'd been drinking since those early days. And that was part of the story. That was part of the game. And I think cigars, and you know better than I did, but cigars, he allegedly smoked 10 a day.
Absolutely.
I think this was part of the show, part of the always being on display.
Well, I think these items brought him comfort. They were constants, right? And this was a man that, we have to remember, was, literally having the weight of the world on his shoulders. And so, having a nice cigar and a little bit of champagne or whiskey, was a completely excusable, allowance, given just the stress and the weight of that time. The other thing that we've seen that I think is quite fascinating is the intentionality with which Winston Churchill constructed his public persona. This was a man that understood the power of dressing properly. And, a lot of his clothing, his hats, his suits, were very deliberately chosen as, not props, but, were chosen to help build a public persona. And in some ways was, his kind of public relations, in order to create his identity.
But he was eminently recognizable.
Yes.
The hat, the cigar, the look.
And in an era where, where photography really came on to the world stage, for the first time, we had newspapers and photography and things being printed. That was powerful, that image that he was able to transmit to the world.
But do you think he did it deliberately? Do you think, he started accidentally?
We'll never know. But I think that, there is a brilliance to Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
And I think to in any way insinuate that he wasn't perceptive in some ways would undermine, in fact, how intelligent, how smart, and how strategic of a man Winston Churchill was. Now, it's not to say that he didn't, in fact, genuinely love these aspects of his life. But I think that they could have been just as easily hid from public view as they were really shoved in the public view.
And just to sort of finish the run of Pol Rogers, and to mark his 150th, we thought we'd open a bottle of the Pol Roger Cuvée Sir Winston Churchill. So Churchill only ever drank Pol Roger vintage, but we made this, the Cuvée Sir Winston Churchill, in honour of Churchill.
When did you start that?
The first winter of 1975. So he died in January 65, funerals February 65. But 10 years afterwards of the 75, Christian de Bie got permission from Mary Soames, who was Churchill's daughter, to make the first Cuvée Sir Winston Churchill. It was released at Blenheim Palace. It was made in tiny quantities. And the blend is still a closely guarded family secret, but it's mostly Pinot Noir with a bit of Chardonnay. Because actually the vintage Pol Roger Churchill drank was mostly Pinot Noir with a bit of Chardonnay. And so it's an older, more mature version. It's made in exactly the same way as Pol Roger. It's still stainless steel fermented, long aged, darker in colour, more Pinot Noir, more structure to it. These are the best grapes from the best vineyards, which are Grand Cru. We have this concept of top grade Grand Cru vineyards in Champagne, and only made in the best bottled vintage, and in tiny quantities.
Yeah.
And these are wines that are made for further aging.
Interesting.
And you can just see it's got a bit more going for it. 2015, it's got that fabulous nose to me. The first glass of this is great. The last glass is absolutely fabulous because it gets some fresh air, it allows to get some air, and you relax into the wine as well. Yeah. So the best wine, it's the last glass, is always the best. And you can see why Churchill got right down to the bottom of every single bottle.
Yeah.
And then got going again the following day.
Yeah. Well, the company certainly becomes more interesting the more one drinks. And I can see that maybe this is perhaps why Winston Churchill insisted in serving champagne as he entertained. I guess, on what is Churchill's 150th birthday, let us raise our glasses and a toast to being unapologetic about the things it is that we love. Yeah. A good friend of mine who was French once said that the greatest luxury in life is sharing one's passions for others. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For sharing your passions with us.
Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers. From my time with James, it's clear that Winston Churchill's legacy lives on in every bottle of Pol Roger. In 1975, a decade after his passing, Pol Roger introduced the Cuvée Sir Winston Churchill, a champagne crafted in his honor, strong, bold, and built to age, the qualities that Churchill admired most. The Cuvée Sir Winston Churchill wasn't just a tribute, it was a reminder of his indelible impact, of a man who valued resilience, friendship, and life's finest pleasures. So let us raise a glass to Sir Winston Churchill, the man who saw in Pol Roger not just a champagne, but a friend, a source of strength, and a reason to celebrate. In the spirit of a man who believed that champagne was always a good idea, may we continue to toast to life's victories, large and small, with the drink that bears his name and a legacy that bubbles on. In our next episode, join us as we continue our journey exploring the fabric of one of the 20th century's most distinguished figures, visiting Winston Churchill's favorite tailor Henry Poole, and venturing inside the world's oldest hat maker, Lock & Co.